6 men died in 12 months, different countries, different circumstances, different causes listed on whatever paperwork existed at all. A heart attack in Vienna, a car accident outside Beirut, a drowning in the South China Sea that the local authorities closed within 48 hours and never reopened. 6 deaths that had nothing to do with each other. They were connected by a single man, a man whose name does not appear in any declassified document, whose face has never been published in any newspaper, whose existence the United States government will neither confirm nor deny in response to any formal inquiry submitted through any legal channel available to the public. And here is the part that should stop you. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not speculation dressed in the language of fact. Every fragment of information in this story comes from partially declassified internal assessments, Congressional Intelligence Committee footnotes, and the specific, careful silences of people who know exactly what they are not allowed to say. Is a story that the most powerful intelligence agency on Earth decided the world was not ready to know. 6 men, 12 months, 1 officer. Names of soldiers, agents, and officers who gave everything in service to a country that promised to remember them. But there is another wall, not marble, not open to the public, not photographed or discussed in any hearing or address. It exists behind locked doors, in a corridor that appears on no official floor plan, inside a building most Americans will never enter. And on that wall, there are no names, just stars, each one representing a life the government acknowledges only in the most minimal, most deliberately uninformative way possible. This story is about the man behind one of those stars. His name does not matter, because officially, for the purposes of every government document that has ever been filed, reviewed, or partially declassified, he did not exist in the way that you and I exist. But here is what we do know. In the span of 12 months, 365 days, 6 men died. 6 men who operated at the highest levels of global terrorism, arms trafficking, and intelligence sabotage, evaded the CIA, Interpol, MI6, and Mossad for years. 6 men who believed, genuinely, completely believed, that they were untouchable. They were wrong. Each death was different. Each location was different. Each method carried the signature of someone who understood not just how to eliminate a target, but how to make the world believe that nothing had happened at all. In Washington, on the mornings that followed each of these deaths, a small number of people inside a specific building received a specific kind of briefing. They read it, they acknowledged it, they shredded it, and then they went back to their desks and continued their day as if the report had never existed. That is the America that does not appear in textbooks. So who was he? This officer with no name, no record, and no existence that any government will formally confirm. How did 6 of the world's most dangerous men die within 12 months of crossing his path? And what did it cost? Not the government, not the mission, but the man himself. That is what this story is about. The making of a ghost. The CIA does not recruit the way movies tell you it does. No single conversation that changes everything overnight. The real process is slower, quieter, and far more deliberate, studying how they think, how they handle pressure, how they behave when they believe no one is paying attention. Because the CIA is always paying attention. He was identified not because he was the strongest candidate in a room or the most academically gifted. He was identified because of something far rarer, the ability to become someone else so completely that even the people closest to him began to question which version of him was real. His training did not look like training. He was being placed inside situations, real situations with real consequences, and observed to see if he could disappear into a crowd, into a personality that was not his own. The question his handlers kept returning to was whether anyone would ever know he had been there at all. He spoke 4 languages before he was 30, not conversationally, fluently, with regional dialect. He understood the way people move when they feel safe. These were skills the CIA found in him, and then sharpened to an edge that most people never get close enough to feel. The psychological component of his preparation was the part that would have disturbed most Americans if they had ever been permitted to see it. It trains them for moral flexibility, the ability to hold 2 completely contradictory truths at the same time and function effectively inside the tension between them. By the time he received his first operational deployment, he was not the person who had walked into the agency's orbit years earlier. That person had been methodically and deliberately taken apart. What had been rebuilt in his place was something the CIA refers to: a functional ghost, present, capable, lethal, and, for all practical purposes, invisible. Then the list arrived. 6 names, printed on a document that had no head header, no identifying information of any kind. Just 6 names, 6 locations, and a timeline that gave him 12 months. His handler placed it on the table between them, said nothing, and waited. He read it once, he folded it, he slid it back across the table, and then he asked only one question. He asked what happened to the last officer who had been given a list like 2 words that told him everything he needed to know. He didn't. 6 names, 12 months, 0 witnesses. The first name on the list was a man who had spent 17 years making himself invisible to Western intelligence. He operated out of 3 countries simultaneously, never staying in any single location for more than 11 days, never using the same communication channel twice. The CIA's previous attempts had produced nothing. The officer studied him for 6 weeks before making a single move. He studied the man's patterns the way a person studies a language. He found it. A single recurring deviation, a gap of approximately 40 minutes every 9 to 11 days, where the target was alone 40 minutes. That was all he needed. The official record of what happened during those 40 minutes does not exist. What the fragments suggest is that it was quiet, that no one in the surrounding area heard anything, and that by the time anyone began asking questions, the officer was already on a flight to a different continent under a different name. Target 1, 11 days, 0 witnesses. The second name was more complex. This was a man embedded inside a legitimate organization, a financial institution with offices in 4 European cities, providing covers. The CIA had known about him for 8 months. He spent 3 weeks building a persona credible enough to gain access to the same professional circles the target moved in. He attended the same events, cultivated the same peripheral contacts, positioned himself as a person. When they finally met, the target liked him immediately. That was the point. What followed over the next 2 weeks was a masterclass in the kind of proximity operation that the CIA trains for but rarely executes with this level of precision. The officer gave the target every reason to trust him and no reason to question him. And then, on a Thursday evening in a city, the second name on the list ceased to be a problem. Target 2, 3 weeks, 1 conversation the target never walked away from. The third and fourth targets required a different approach entirely because they operated together, traveled together, and had constructed their survival around the principle that 2 people who trust each other completely are exponentially harder to isolate than 1 person operating alone. The officer recognized this immediately and did not attempt to separate them. Instead, he found the assumption that their shared judgment is sound. He attacked their confidence in each other, a carefully constructed sequence of events designed to make each man question, just slightly, just enough, whether the other was still who he claimed to be. The paranoia that followed did his work for him, partially. What he completed himself took less than an hour and left both men in a situation that their own associates would spend months trying to explain. Target 3, Target 4, eliminated within 72 hours of each other. The fifth name was the one that required the most patience. This was not a man who made mistakes. He had survived in hostile territory for over a decade. He was, by any professional assessment, the closest thing to genuinely untouchable that the intelligence world had produced in a generation. The officer waited 4 months before acting. The target made one decision, a single logistical choice driven by a personal matter that had nothing to do with his operational life, and that decision placed him in a location, at a time, under circumstances that the officer had been quietly preparing for since the second month of his observation. The fifth name was removed from the list. The sixth target was the reason the list existed at all. The other 5 were significant, dangerous men, whose removal made the world measurably safer. The sixth was the reason only 4 people in the US government knew this officer's full identity. He was connected to people and to information at a level that made his existence a direct, active threat to American intelligence infrastructure. He had been untouchable because getting close to him meant getting close to everything protecting him, and everything protecting him was watching for exactly that. The officer spent the final 2 months of his 12-month window doing the one thing nobody had tried before. He stopped hiding. The mission that almost broke him. When you are a CIA officer operating inside a mission that does not officially exist is not a reckless act. It is, when executed with precision. 6 Target's entire defensive architecture was built around the assumption that a threat would come from concealment. The moment the officer abandoned concealment entirely, he became visible, unclassifiable. The target's people saw him. That was intentional. They ran his cover identity through every database available to them and found exactly what the officer had spent weeks carefully constructing. instructing, they watched him for 2 weeks. They found nothing. The officer had become exactly who his cover said he was, but as a total replacement of it. The man he had been trained to become had temporarily ceased to exist. This is the part of the operation that the CIA's internal debrief would later describe as an unprecedented level of identity dissolution. What that phrase means in human terms is something the documentation is not designed to capture, because what it actually means is that at some point during those 2 weeks, the officer stopped being certain. He had gone so far into the identity he was inhabiting that the effort of maintaining the boundary between that identity and his own had become genuinely costly. He did not stop. He was too well trained to stop. Access to the sixth target through patience and through the slow, almost mundane accumulation of trust that happens between people who occupy the same professional space over time. By the third week, the officer was inside the operational perimeter, but socially, he was accepted, and from that position, close enough to see the target's actual daily reality, every fortress has a door. This door that opened from the inside. What happened in the final 72 hours of the sixth operation has never been described in any document that has been made available to researchers, journalists, or congressional oversight. What the fragmentary evidence suggests is that it involved 3 separate locations, a window of approximately 4 hours, and a level of operational precision that left the target's own security apparatus temporarily convinced that what had occurred was not the result of external intervention at all. The sixth name was removed from the list. The officer filed no report that night. He sat in a room and did something that his training had spent years teaching him to defer. He stopped moving. For the first time in 12 months, there was nothing left to do. Just a room and a window, silent, and that is when it arrived. Not regret, exactly. It was the sudden, complete awareness of the distance between the person he had been 12 months ago and whatever he had become in the process of doing what he had done. 6 men were dead. The world was, by any classified metric available, measurably safer. The mission had been executed with a perfection that his handlers would later describe as exemplary. He sat in that room and understood, for the first time with complete clarity, that exemplary was not the same as survivable. But there are things a person can lose that do not show up in a medical evaluation, things that the CIA's psychological screening process is not designed to detect. He had inhabited other people so completely and so repeatedly that the architecture of his own identity had been altered in ways he could not yet fully map. He thought about the question he had asked his handler before the mission began. What happened to the last officer who had been given a list like this? He didn't. The officer understood now that the answer had not been about death. It had been about something quieter, and in certain ways, more permanent than death. The last officer hadn't died. He had simply stopped being the person who could be given a list like that, and that version of him had not come back. 3 days later, he walked into a debriefing room in a location he has never publicly identified, sat across from a panel of 4 people whose names he has never disclosed, and answered their questions in the same calm, precise, unhurried manner he had answered every question in every briefing throughout his career. He gave them what they needed. He told them the missions were complete. Then he placed a single sheet of paper on the table. His handler picked it up, read it, looked at him for a long moment without speaking. It was a resignation. The ghost the CIA never officially had. America has always maintained 2 versions of itself. The first version is the one taught in classroom, played to the world as evidence and the rule of law. The second version operates in the space between those principles and the reality of a world that does not share them. The officer whose story this is belongs entirely to the second version. After his resignation, he disappeared, the cover identities were retired, the operational contacts were severed, the fragments of documentation that touched his work were reviewed, redacted, and in several cases destroyed entirely. 6 deaths occurred. The officer responsible does not appear in any file that has been released. What remains are fragments, a partially declassified internal assessment that refers, in one sentence, to a period of sustained unilateral field operations that produced results exceeding all projected parameters. Buried in a footnote, acknowledging the existence of a category of field officer whose operational profile falls outside standard documentation requirement. One sentence, one footnote. note. That is the official monument to 12 months and 6 lives. There are men and women whose entire existence was spent making decisions in the dark so that other people could live their lives in the light. People who will never know the names of those who protected them. That is the country operating beneath the country you know. The officer who eliminated 6 of the world's most dangerous men in 12 months is still out there, existing in the only way the CIA ever truly prepared him to exist, as someone who was never really there at all.